Hello and welcome back to Podcast from the Edge with me, Peter Bruce. What a year already, eh? The naval exercises off False Bay with an assortment of partners or, God forbid, allies last week has turned into something of a public relations disaster for President Cyril Ramaphosa after it became clear that his instruction that an Iranian vessel initially invited to the exercise not take part, certainly not take part in the offshore exercises. Anyway, he was simply ignored, and it seems a pretty grave moment in our democratic politics to me. I asked Helmut Roemer Heitman, easily the doyen of our military experts and analysts in South Africa, to help me understand why Ramaphosa was ignored and whether it reveals any real damage in our chain of command. Helmut, thank you so much for joining. If we could just start at the beginning. How did this exercise, Will for Peace, I think it's called, come about? The story is that it was led by the Chinese, but in South African waters and out of the main South African naval base at Simonstown in False Bay near Cape Town. Was it a Chinese idea?
Look, I think probably, much like Mosey 1 and Mosey 2, the previous exercises. And in fact, this isn't really a BRICS exercise. As the Indians pointed out, it's Mosey 3. They called it BRICS to make it sound a little bit better. It probably was a Chinese initiative. They have the ships, they have the experience, they have the money, I suppose. I don't think they paid us anything. But yeah, it's one of three. It's now the third in a series, so it's not as if it's something new to South Africa. The previous ones were also criticized. You'll recall one was actually on the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which was a little unfortunate. And what is baffling with this one, government has known about it since before the G20 meeting last year, because it was postponed to avoid clashing with that.
Yeah.
So there was nothing new. They knew it was going to come now. It's just another knee-jerk reaction from a government that clearly doesn't understand foreign relations and doesn't understand the economic implications of irritating or even antagonizing our most lucrative trading partners. With the United States and Europe are the countries with which we have a positive balance of trade.
Yeah.
And a very healthy one. So far, anyway. I think that's where the core problem lies. It's an incoherent foreign policy and an inability among government departments to talk to each other.
Just talk us through what Mosey is and what the idea behind it was. What's Mosey mean?
Well, I think it's just another name picked up by a computer that picks out code names. Yeah. They come up with funny ones every now and then, and sometimes just bland ones. Essentially both Mosey 1 and 2, and I think this exercise, were essentially what navies call passage exercises. It's really just basic procedures and drills, maybe a little bit of cross-decking, moving personnel from one ship to another, or one will pretend to be a cargo ship and the other one that's been held by pirates, another one may be board to free the crew. That's about as far as it goes. There was reference to some gunnery exercises, but only light weapons. I don't know if those actually took place. So it's not a terribly complex exercise, not a terribly important exercise. It is useful in the sense that, ships of any old navy could bump into ships of another navy at a disaster scene, a sinking cruise line or whatever, a pirate attack. And then it's helpful if both ships are from navies who understand each other's procedures. So that's why people do it primarily. Navies, we do it with used to do it, I think we still do with pretty much any navy ship that passed South Africa. Have this basic sort of passage exercise. So we know how to speak to each other come some problem like that in the future. So not a great big military exercise in that sense. If it wasn't for the political implications or diplomatic implications, it would have been a minor blip in the landscape.
So how does let's say is it correct to call it a war game, or is it simply an exercise, as you say, pretty normal, pretty anodyne? But is it only allies who do this together, or is it normal for any navy with any other navy to do this?
Look, the passage exercise is pretty much any navy will do with any navy. We've done them with passing American and British ships, or French ships. We've done it in the past with other navies too. Way back, even in the days of apartheid and so, we had a passage exercise with a Pakistani ship going past, which had to call in Simonstown for fuel anyway. So navies do this with pretty much anybody other than an actual declared enemy. It's routine, it's normal, and it's as it should be. All sailors have one enemy in common, that's the sea.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to deal with things like shipwrecks, like pirate incidents, etc. And I mean, the Chinese Navy, for instance, has been pretty active against piracy in the northern Indian Ocean, a thing that we dodged for a long time, finally going on as far as the Mozambique Channel. So there's a lot of logic to exercising with them. Rather less logic via Russia and Iran, who are strategically and economically relevant to us.
And so, Helmut, they all assemble in Simonstown a week before last. And the first few days seemed largely ceremonial. There were photographs on social media, a few parades, such like. And then news leaks, or it is announced or caused to leak, that President Cyril Ramaphosa has asked that the Iranians don't take part in the drills on open water. AGOA is being discussed again in the U.S. Congress. The Iranian government is killing protesters on that country's streets. And U.S. President Donald Trump is, quote, locked and loaded, he said at the time, to respond to what the Iranians were doing. So clearly the realization dawns on the president that some of this might not look that great. You make the point earlier on that the government would have known about this before last November, but when would planning for this have begun?
Oh hell, they would have started at the latest early last year.
Right.
Because people have got to, when are we going to have ships, where to schedule them, prepare that. Then you've got meetings to decide what you're going to do in the exercise, nail down the procedures, the signals procedures, etc. Get your diplomatic clearances and so on. So I would think at the very, very latest, it would have been the middle of last year.
Right.
It was scheduled for November originally.
Yeah. Who plans this stuff? Is it done at the level of officials and military officers? Is it done at ministerial level? On the South African side, who would have been involved?
Well, once an exercise is decided on, then, well, it's the military level. In our case, the general planning would be from the Joint Operations Division, because they're responsible for joint and for combined operations. Joint being inter-service, Army, Air Force, Navy, combined being with other countries. Obviously, also then speaking to the Navy, because the Navy has got to provide the ships. And they would then speak to the Navy to decide what ships can the Navy provide, what's physically seaworthy and operational, what types of exercise would the Navy maybe want to carry out, and then that's also discussed obviously with the other participating countries, and they come up with a program for the exercise. You'll recall for the previous Mosey, we in fact didn't really have a ship available for it. Just Protea went up there, and one of the frigates, I think it was Andwana, and she really just lay alongside. This time was a little bit more active, because Amatola has been at sea quite a lot, but she's still not fully operational, so real limits to what could be done at the best of times. But it's at the military level. Once there's been a decision to exercise, that decision would normally lie with government. Do we want to exercise with country A or country B or whatever? That's not really for the military to do something.
That's a political decision, and so that's the Ministry of Defense, or is it the Foreign DIRCO?
Well, they should decide that together, and I mean they're both on the security cluster.
Yeah.
So that's where that level should be decided.
So we get to the point. So, okay, the planning is done, right, and we get to the point where everybody's now in Simonstown, and we'll get to the point last week where the president becomes so alarmed, and we can debate later what took him so long, that he instructs that the Iranians should not take part in the open water drills, right? Is that his call to make in this case, or what does the chain of command look like? He's worried. Who does he tell?
He is the head of state. He is the commander in chief. That is his call. He can make it. Yeah. What we don't know, at least I don't know, is what his actual instruction was. Did he say the Iranians must pack up and go home? Did he say, oh, well, they can just observe from shore, or can they go along in a ship to watch from a ship? Or did he say, oh, God, try and make this thing less visible, it's embarrassing? We don't know, depending what that instruction was, we don't really know what the Defense Force was expected to do. That's the first issue. We simply don't know that. Nobody's told us that. I haven't seen it. The other question then, of course, is if the instruction was the Iranians must go home, what if the Iranians said, well, actually, no, we've come all this way, we're going to stay? What do we do then? Do we hook their corvette up to tugs and pull it out into international waters and shoo their two big ships out to sea? Do we arrest them or what? If that, maybe it's a little far-fetched, but if that was the case, then possibly the least damaging solution was to go on with the exercises if as per normal, rather than have a major international catastrophe like that. But that's that whole process too. I mean, once the president gave that instruction, whatever it was, at that point, yes, it would go from the minister to the chief of defense force. He could have just picked up the phone to the chief of defense force himself, but I gather it went through the minister. From there to joint operations, from there to whoever the exercise director on the South African Navy side was. But at the same time, they would have to contact the Iranian and Chinese embassies and bring them up to speed. So Durka would have been involved at that level too, or should have been.
We don't know whether they were. Not yet.
No, and as I say, the really key issue is we don't know what the instruction was. The instruction was, just let them observe. Well, then maybe their ship went out and only observed and didn't fire any rounds and didn't take part in boarding or so. Again, we don't know that. But the damage was done the day the ships arrived here. So it was all actually far too late.
I'm trying to understand where there could possibly be any confusion here. So the president makes a call to Angie Motshekga, his defense minister. She calls the head of the defense force, who calls the head of joint operations, who presumably then calls, as you say, the director of the exercise. He doesn't call the head of the Navy, who then calls the...
No, the chief of Navy would be kept informed of this, obviously.
Yeah.
It's his Navy. But he's not directly in that command line. We've got the weird situation here that once we established the Joint Operations Division, we got a bit carried away. And pretty much anything that isn't a pure Army, Air Force, Navy thing with nobody else involved becomes a joint operation and is headed up by them to do with the training, the exercises. So the service chiefs are really right outside that loop. All they have to do in this case is provide ships and the base.
Joint operations is a pretty powerful unit inside the Ministry of Defense or Department of Defense.
Yeah, strictly speaking. And I was involved in drawing up a concept succession plan for the Defense Force, which was never implemented, like everything else that was never implemented. And the concept there was that the future Chief of Defense Force would go serve a tour at joint operations, then become chief of his or her service, Army, Air Force, Navy, whatever, then go back to become chief of joint operations, and from there become chief of Defense Force. Because that way, the chief of Defense Force, having been siege ops, has the best grip on what's going on, what capabilities we have, what's happening in the region, etc. That was the plan. So it is actually a key post.
And did that happen in the case of the current chief of the Defense Force?
He came directly. He was general of the commanding special forces. From there, he went to the Army, where he ran the infantry formation. Then he had a more senior post, then became Chief Defense Force. In a sense, having done special forces, while it's a junior post, it's a one-star post, that the officer running the special forces is pretty clued up, almost as up to date and up clued up as a Chief of Joint Operations would be, simply by the nature of the post. But no, it wasn't ideal. Previously, they've come directly from a service, not through joint ops. So pays your money, takes your pick. Yeah. We have a thing on paper, we've never actually implemented it.
I have noticed in pictures of the head of the Defense Force, General Ruzani Mpaswa, he has parabat wings on his chest, so he would have done all of that cool, sort of quite courageous training. He's a real soldier, I presume.
Look, I think so. I don't know where he did the silly thing of jumping out on aircraft. The operator badge, I think, was an honorary badge, which previous GOC special forces have also been awarded.
Yeah.
There's been some noise by some people saying he should have taken it off when he wasn't commanding anymore. Personally, my view is no. If I give somebody an honorary badge, then I want them to continue wearing it until they retire one day. And in fact, certainly one of the retired chiefs of special forces, who was not himself an operator, does wear his in retirement because it was an honor and you wear it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was, for background, General Mafanya was handpicked for the post of GOC Special Forces by two previous officers commanding the Special Forces, both of whom were exceedingly professional people. So he was clearly regarded as a competent man.
Yeah.
From my personal experience with him, I can add that he's an extremely modest man.
Yeah.
He doesn't go for splurges and big hotel suites, penthouses or whatever. So he's one of those officers, as are a lot of the senior officers. When he doesn't know something, he asks. He doesn't assume just because I'm a general I know it all.
Yeah. He made a bit of a splash last year, didn't he, when he traveled to Iran, and was photographed in a giant sort of gold-plated hall with the chief of the Iranian Defense Forces, and making some fairly highly political statements about South Africa and Iran working together, being friends, both opposing the Israeli action in Gaza at the time. Was that unusual for a South African officer?
Look, I think unusual for a South African officer, but I've seen similar statements made by, for instance, American officers visiting European countries.
Yeah.
A friendly power, not necessarily an ally, but a friendly power.
Yeah.
In fact, to an extent, even senior American officers visiting South Africa in the late 90s, made similar statements here. And I think a key issue we need to keep in mind here is that what Mafanya's visit to Iran and his whatever he said there, and now inviting the Iranians to this exercise, is not out of line with our foreign policy.
Yeah.
We had Minister Pandor go to Iran and say nice things to them. We had to have a little whisper sweet nothings into the ear of Hamas on the telephone. We've had also with the Russians for that matter, we had the president call Russia our ally.
Yeah.
So I don't, this idea that the Defense Force is trying to run foreign policy or stepping out from under the civilian government, I don't think is true. They may have been blumbling a bit in things. Yes, that's possible. For instance, he should have had his own man recording his discussions in Iran, not rely on the Iranians. But I don't see them having done anything that wasn't part of our foreign policy.
Yeah. And the head of joint operations, this is Lieutenant General Siphiwe Sangweni. What's his background? Is he experienced as well? I mean, he's an army guy, given the rank that he has?
No, look, they're all lacking in experience because, the last experienced ones, i.e. with real operational experience, were SADF officers.
Yeah.
After, that served until 89. And from then on, it's been fewer and fewer people with experience. And the Defense Force, in fact, even the old Defense Force, has had a problem for a long time that the Army dominates because it's the largest service. And the Army that has not, in my time involved with the Defense Force, that is since 1970, had a chief of the Army who'd ever commanded an operational unit, let alone a formation. It was always staff officers and often personnel people and the like.
Yeah.
Which has been a weakness. The rot there started, I think, with way back to General Malan, who went on a course in America and came back with the idea that you can manage a defense force. You can't. You can lead it or you can command it. And management is just one of the tools you use. Yeah. And from there, it sort of went downhill at that level. So none of the current generals have operational experience. There's some of the more junior ones, yes, from the peacekeeping operations. There are probably a few there. But none of the 3 stars have operations. Well, not their fault. Any peacetime army or any peacetime military has the same problem.
Yeah. Does it say anything about our military there? I mean, okay, we're a peacetime military. We are, and then obviously lots of stories about how badly financed it is, badly funded. Is it fair to say that it's, given the circumstances, professionally led, or is it badly led, given the fact that you're either leading or you're not leading?
Okay, look, I'm now several years out of date.
Yeah.
But with some exceptions, fairly recent exceptions, it was pretty well led. Our units that were deployed in Burundi and Darfur and DRC, Central African Republic, or Comores back in 2006, all of them have done well. They've done well in peacekeeping. They've done well when it turned into combat. So there's nothing wrong at that level. And for instance, the deployment to the Central African Republic in beginning of 13 or end of 2012, the 2006 very short notice deployment to Comoros, the initial deployment to Burundi, they were all done on very tight time schedules and very professionally planned. Where we did fall down certainly was the more recent deployments in Mozambique and DRC, where the force was ridiculously too small, no air support, etc., etc. And what is now coming out of the DRC deployment is also some issues lower down. But to be fair there, I know that Chief of the Army, and I think Chief of the Air Force, and probably General Mafanya himself, actually said to the politicians, "Listen, we can't do this job. We no longer have the capability." But we're told to shut up and get on with it anyway. And then, like good soldiers, they obeyed orders and went and got on with it. And we wound up with a catastrophe.
So let's come back to the exercise. So the president issues this instruction. We assume he issued the instruction. Maybe it wasn't clear. And presumably the board of inquiry that's sitting will find out. It will come to the board of inquiry in a minute. So he issues the instruction, but nonetheless, there they are, because there are photographs of it, of the Iranian corvette putting to sea with the other ships at the beginning of the open water exercises. What is happening there? That, I mean, if it was never confirmed that Ramaphosa had ordered that this not happen, but we only knew that later on. But presumably, in the presidency and in the Ministry of Defense and perhaps the department, somebody's saying, "Good grief, didn't you get the message?" Looking at these photographs on Twitter.
It depends on what his actual instruction was. If he said, "Okay, well, let them observe but not participate," well, them sailing, I mean, the UAE ship came down here as observers, but they sailed with the force as well.
Yeah.
So whether they finally participated, I don't know. So it could be that it's at that level, well, they just went out to observe, which doesn't really get us very, very far diplomatically, but it could be that. It could be that he simply said, "We'll try and make it as invisible as possible," and the Navy simply weren't very good at that. It's difficult to do anyway. The damn thing is moored in Simonstown. So, everybody at the moment is jumping on the idea that the Defense Force simply disobeyed or ignored an order from the president. I find that a little difficult to believe. I'm more inclined to think it was a vague, wishy-washy instruction that they tried to obey, or alternatively, that between the Chinese and the Iranians, they simply decided to treat us like lapdogs and put us in our place.
That would also be a little unusual, surely.
Yes,
unless they didn't.
They don't have much respect for us.
Well, let's come back to that. But I just wanted to ask you, so if he does say, tell the Iranians not to take part in the exercise, is it okay then for them to simply observe it at sea? Does that make it all right? I mean, does it get everyone off the hook is what I'm asking.
Not entirely, no. And personally, I find it a bit strange that observers would go in their own ship to observe, because they don't really learn very much. Normally, somebody observing an exercise would go aboard the ships that are exercising.
Yeah.
So there it does smell a little bit of dead rodent. But having said that, the UAE said they were just here to observe, and they went to sea. I'm not sure if they changed their minds and participated, or if they were also just, observing from their own ship.
Yeah.
Personally, I suspect they were down here to do some communications intelligence on the Iranians because they don't like them very much. But that's another view. So I think if the president wanted this thing to be slightly defused, there wasn't much defusing left to do, then would have had to be a case that the Iranian ship stays in port, or preferably just buggers off and goes home.
How often do these kind of messes happen? I mean, there was a case somebody was telling me not too long ago where apparently the Italian Navy sent its only aircraft carrier to South Africa, having got agreement to do some sort of drill from us, and apparently also to use that missile testing facility near Bredasdorp in the Western Cape, only to be turned away already on the high seas and already quite close to our coastline.
In fact,
are you familiar with
three
that?
incidents like that?
Yeah.
One was the Italians,
What happened there?
They had booked the Overberg test range. They actually put into Cape Town Harbour on the way to going there, have first a courtesy visit, when they were told, it's all been changed, you can't use the range. They took it on the chin, but they did keep the flag of the fleet waiting for 4 hours in his car on the dockside before they allowed him aboard their ship to say hello. Before that, we did it to the Turks as well, but they complained so loudly that it was rescinded and they were allowed to go to OTR.
Yeah.
And we also, the last real exercise Good Hope with the Germans, we had a fiasco. Something like 48 hours before the exercise, we suddenly decided to withdraw overflight and landing rights from the German Air Force aircraft coming down here. Now, they'd already booked the tanker aircraft to bring them down. They had done all the flight planning and the clearances with everybody else. The missiles they were going to launch at OTR had already been shipped down here and trucked up to OTR, everything. That was finally cleared up, minister-to-minister phone call. But at that point, the German Ministry of Defense actually said, well, we'll never exercise with the South Africans again. The German attaches here moved heaven and earth to get that watered down a bit. So we had a couple of minor ones since. At the time, I queried this, what the hell happened? The one answer I got, and I'm not going to name the imbecile who gave me that answer, but he was quite senior, was, they didn't respect us enough, which really didn't get me very far. I asked the then chief of intelligence, and he hedged his bets a bit. He said, let's say there was a major communications gap, but he was exceedingly angry at the time. I could pick that up. So we've messed up 3 times in that way around. And this time we've messed up the other way around.
So
recently also we told the Americans they couldn't exercise with weapons, which they've done every time so far.
Sorry, what about the Americans?
Coming with exercise.
Yeah. So who's making those calls? So the Italians are almost there, the Germans are almost there, and suddenly permission is withdrawn. Is that an official deep in the bowels of the Department of Defense, or is it a politician somewhere saying, no, we can't have this?
That was all someone somewhere in defense, whether uniformed or secretariat, I don't know. But I got the impression at the time that Chief of Intelligence, certainly with the German issue, that he was lumbered with some dinosaurs that he couldn't get rid of. And one of them decided it was a great big security risk and blah, blah, blah. But then it was all rescinded anyway.
So a piece of paper crosses someone. Yeah. So there was another incident, and you'll know about this, in 2024, when an American naval vessel went aground just off Libreville, off Gabon, and it was called the Herschel Woody Williams. It's a supply vessel. I think it supplies the African.
It's a rather strange landing platform,
yeah. Probably a converted tanker or container ship. Anyway, it goes aground off Libreville, and the tide comes back in, and the ship refloats, and they decide to head down towards Cape Town because why not? It's a sophisticated port, and they can please check check underneath and see what damage has been done. And somebody, and I was told fairly, I was told confidentially, but I mean very well sourced, that somebody in the Department of Defense with a rank of brigadier refused permission to put into Cape Town. And I presume, and the ship then sailed past Cape Town, ended up in the Seychelles where it was repaired or whatever repairs were needed. But presumably people don't forget that. There'll be some corner of the Pentagon, which whatever Donald Trump has done, this was long before Trump, this was under Biden, who was a very friendly president. Presumably these kinds of slights aren't easily forgotten.
Yeah, look, we unfortunately are still stuck with a bunch of people who grew up in the Soviet Union era and believe all the mythology and the fairy tales of that period. The West, the entire collected West is evil, except, of course, BMW, Mercedes, Tag Heuer, and things like that. And everybody's opposed to the West is a nice guy, even if they go around killing civilians wholesale. Unfortunately, we're stuck with them for the time being. It's not an attitude I pick up, or was when I was still active in the defense world, not an attitude I picked up with officers a bit lower down in rank structure, who had much more
younger guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and even guys who spent time in the Soviet Union. I mean, I'm thinking one officer now who I know quite well who still believes in some of that stuff, but he was very focused on buying American transport aircraft for our light transport requirement because that particular aircraft was the best to meet our requirement. So he was being professional. He may not have liked the Americans much, but then our previous government didn't like Washington either, so that didn't change. But he was being professional about it. And I think that there is a whole group of pretty professional people coming up through the system who have practical experience. In the Navy, they did the Mozambique Channel patrols. There are a lot of Army officers and in the Air Force, helicopter people, for instance, with experience in the Congo, in Car, in Burundi, in Chad, and in Darfur, the Congo's deployment. So there are a lot of people with practical soldiering experience coming up through the system.
Yeah. Well, there's a wonderful story out at the moment of a lieutenant colonel rescuing people up in Limpopo and during the current flooding in the middle of the night, complete darkness. I think it was an Augusta helicopter that he was flying. Seems to have done a really amazing job. So it's good to know those people are out there.
Look, I'm a little out of date, but for instance, a few years back now, I spent some time at Makara at the fighter base, and I actually said to the then chief of the Air Force, having spoken to these guys, the young pilots, and they come in all colors and genders. I wish I was 20-something again, so I could actually start all over and maybe join this lot, because they were so keen, so serious, so professional, so competent. It was just plain fun dealing with them. And for several years, almost 30 years, I lectured the Navy staff course. Haven't done now the last several years. But again, it was a 2-day lecture program, and it became quickly a 2-day conversation with professional people who are really interested in their profession. So that's the people coming up through the system. I'm not trying to denigrate all the guys at the top of the structure now. We had some very competent people come through.
Yeah.
And particularly if you go back to the first crop of senior MK people who came in, Slanda Joe Modise and Tela Lakota, all of them, apart from being serious people, they all had one great quality. They were quite happy to admit they didn't know what was going on. Would somebody please explain?
Yeah.
And that takes you 90% of the way.
It certainly does. Look, I think the current head of the Navy who trained in Russia as well, Vice Admiral Monde Lobisa, right? He's Russian trained.
Well, probably trained in Ukraine. They seem to have forgotten that part.
Yes. So the Department of Defense generally then is professionalizing, or is it really a long way to go? I mean, we don't want to be too starry-eyed about these things.
Look,
people get jobs.
It is a long way to go. See, let me take a case of a Shitter frigate, say. Okay, Amatola, for instance, now probably works pretty damn well because she had 134 sea days last year, which is pretty good going for any Navy in the world, except in our case, it was only one ship that did it.
Yeah.
So, and she's got a new captain now, so he's not all that clued up, maybe, unless he was bored at the time. But so she's fine. But the other ships, I think let's assume, and I'm happy to assume it, that every single member of the crew of the other frigates is actually fully qualified for the post they're in. But if they haven't spent time at sea and exercising and practicing, they haven't gelled as a crew.
And why are those ships? Why are they not at sea, Helmut? Why would
no money for the refits, no money for spare parts?
Okay.
When we bought the frigates, we bought them on the basis of a certain number of sea days per ship per year. I can't remember the number now. And we bought an initial spares package on that basis. And the whole maintenance, upkeep, refit program was based on that.
Right.
Then in January 12, we started with the Mozambique Channel patrols. Or was it 11? Well, whatever. No, anyway.
Yeah.
I think it was January 11. We started with Mozambique Channel patrols. So the utilization went through the roof. But at that point, the first year or so, Treasury didn't provide any additional funding for fuel, for consumables, for seagoing allowances and the like. It was the net result that the Navy had to pillage its maintenance and training budget to keep the ships in the channel. And by the end of 13, we were down to 3 broken frigates and one cannibalized one, for that simple reason. And there you sit. Now, the ships now, yes, one of them has undergone a refit, a partial refit, that's Amatola. One is undergoing a refit. But Amatola's refit was only for ship systems, not the combat system. So the weapons haven't been upgraded, weapons and sensors haven't been upgraded or modernized. The original planned spiral improvement program or spiral upgrade program was never implemented. Same with the submarines. Same in the Air Force. We have the Gripen. We have no, or virtually no, precision air-to-ground weapons for the Gripens. And we never did buy the Mokopa missile for the Roy Falk helicopter. So it's very limited in what it can do. And so it goes right across the Defence Force.
And is it simply
no
money?
matter how professional your people are, if you don't have the tools, you can't do the job.
Yeah.
And you can't even really fully practice to do the job.
Yeah. So the head of the Navy, once again, Vice Admiral Mondelobisi, he made a bit of a noise last year, I think also in November, just before the G20 summit, where he was complaining about underfunding of the Navy, and particularly he seemed to have a fat go at Arms Corps, and I never really understood why. But presumably it's got to do with the refits that the other frigates are undergoing or not undergoing, or the half job done on the Amatola.
Yeah.
What was that
about?
To
be fair, I mean, he and previously the Surgeon General was exceedingly critical as well, you may recall. But in fact, also the previous Chief of the Navy, actually in a press conference with the Minister, the then Minister sitting next to him, said in the press conference that if we go on like this, within a few years, we will not have any frigates or submarines operational, full stop. He was a bit more polite than Admiral Nobisi was now, but same statement. And to be fair, other service chiefs have said the same, and Defence Force chiefs. The thing with Arms Corps is Arms Corps is supposed to run the dockyard. But what happened there was that as the Navy's fleet shrank, the Navy no longer had enough work to keep the dockyard busy. The then Chief of the Navy, Admiral Retief, took in civilian work. So to keep the guys busy and utilize the facilities.
Yeah.
The problem that then came up was he now had wear and tear on his equipment, and he had the security issue, civilians coming in and out. But the Treasury wouldn't allow the Navy to keep any of the money. It all went to the Treasury's B7 account, the well-known black hole. Then he decided, well, in that case, I'm going to stop. There's no point.
Yeah.
Then came a decision, what do we do with the dockyard? The Navy can't keep it functioning because there's simply not enough work to keep people interested, keep them busy. It was either a case of establish a naval division of Denel, a maritime division, or hand it off to Arms Corps. And it was handed off to Arms Corps. The first man they appointed to run it came from the Rand Water Board. Now, I happen to know him, and I know that he is a genuine engineer, qualified engineer with a genuine engineering degree, not an affirmative degree or anything like that. But there's a bit of a difference between the Rand Water Board and refitting warships.
Yes.
The next guy was appointed initially thought he could run the job from his office in Pretoria, which doesn't work. And now you have a situation where A, the money is tight, so there just isn't money for all things, and B, Arms Corps, not just via the Navy, but also Project Ufesta with the Army and some Air Force projects. Arms Corps has become terribly bureaucratic and nitpicking and silly things, demanding double B, triple E compliance when the company involved is actually a German company. Now, they're not going to be compliant, are they?
Yeah.
There's silly things like that. Some really silly stuff too, some more serious. The problem also is that we've lost so many people out of Arms Corps and out of the Defence Force that there are not that many officers left in the Defence Force who can really write a detailed user requirement specification. Now, initially, Arms Corps picked that up and carried that because they still had the engineers. But now Arms Corps doesn't have them anymore either.
Where's they
so
going?
Then you come to, with Arms Corps, for instance, the absolute, I'm going to use the word, imbecility, this new armored personnel area contract. They award a contract to a company without the vehicle actually existing, let alone being tested and evaluated. You can't do that.
Just go back to that. So this is an armored personnel carrier that the Army presumably is ordering, and who won that contract?
Milcorp, apparently. Well, so far, I don't think it's going to go uncontested.
Right. South African
they
company.
don't have a track record of vehicles. I believe they sold 4 vehicles to Namibia. They do some very interesting work in unmanned aerial vehicles, for instance.
Yeah.
But several of the companies that were bidding actually have vehicles in service with armies that are seeing combat on a daily basis in Somalia, in Nigeria, and elsewhere. So those are well-proven vehicles. We know they work. Denel, for that matter, Denel Land Systems could offer the new generation Casper based on the original but modernized new engine, etc. And, the Caspers are in service all over the place. We know they work. So what does Arms Corps do? They award it to a company that doesn't have any real track record in this business. I'm not saying they haven't got good engineers. They probably do, but there's no track record. And much worse, they don't bother to evaluate the vehicle. we have the fancy test range at Gerotech, where you would do your basic evaluation. Then normally what you would do is get half a dozen vehicles, as I did, by the way, with Badger under Project Uvesta, and with every previous vehicle generation, and you put some ordinary soldiers in them to make sure the things are idiot-proof, and you let them run around the field exercising with the vehicles for several months to see what breaks, what doesn't break, does it work, are the ergonomics right, etc. Now, Arms Corps in this case simply placed a contract without having done any of that. That says to me that Arms Corps is no longer functional.
Who does Arms Corps report to?
Minister of Defense.
Right. And has that been a long-standing arrangement?
The funny part is there are all sorts of people in Arms Corps who are paid a rather larger salary than the Chief of the Defense Force.
Yeah. What a sorry story. Helmut, what happens now? So on this exercise, the Board of Inquiry is established. Do we know who's on it? It can't possibly be naval, or it can't be serving officers because their bosses are involved, surely.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to do that. I would think it should be, ideally, it should be an internal Board of Inquiry. It should be somebody from the Secretariat, somebody pretty senior, say like Nick Sendell, who does policy. Somebody from the Chief of Defense Forces office, if not the Chief himself, maybe the Chief of Defense Staff. Not joint ops because they're involved, and not the Navy, obviously, because they're involved. So those would be the key people, and somebody from the legal services side. That would be, now, some of the people are saying should be a parliamentary inquiry. Well, they have a point. This has policy implications. But I think first you do the internal one, and then maybe you'd carry it further. But what I fear is we're going to wind up with a situation like the one after the Waterkloof incident, when the Guptas landed their aircraft there. At the end of the day, it gets blamed on some middle-ranking officer who gets hammered, and afterwards they say terribly sorry and pay a settlement. Deflect from everybody above.
Or make him ambassador to Australia or something.
Well, that too.
In this
case, maybe a nice job would be ambassador to Iran.
Yeah. Based on what we know, and I understand that because we don't know what Cyril Ramaphosa actually said, would you expect any heads to roll after an event, like after a cock-up like this?
They will, ceremonially, somebody's going to get decapitated, but probably somebody fairly low down the totem pole.
Yeah.
But the key question again is, if the president said, get rid of the Iranians, and we didn't, then there are only two options there. Either the order was disobeyed, in which case it's a court-martial cashiering offense, or the Iranians told us to get lost, we're going to stay anyway, in which case a major diplomatic problem. It's one of the two. There's nothing between. But of course, we don't know what he said. Now, if he said, let them observe, well, okay, maybe they sailed along to observe and didn't fire a shot.
Yeah.
No, then it didn't help the situation, but they obeyed the order.
Yeah. And is it fair to say
until we know what the president actually said, we really can't say anything else. We can't comment. And we certainly can't hang anybody just yet.
No. Is it fair to say, in the absence of knowing what he said, is it fair to say nonetheless that our chain of command is broken or damaged or not working?
Look, we can't even say that without knowing what he said. Because if arguments he said simply, try and make it less visible, well, then maybe they did. Well, except for the last parade, which they excluded the press. Well, they excluded the press. That made it less visible.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thinking of the public relations people who really don't understand that business. Yeah. And by the way, never have in the old Defense Force either.
Yeah.
So again, until we know exactly what his instruction was, we can't really do anything. Sorry, I'm going to kill this thing.
Yeah.
There we go. That's our limitation now.
Yeah. How dangerous is the moment?
So, if the order was to get rid of them, then it
Yeah. Is it a dangerous moment? I mean, people disobeying. There have been criticisms from the head of the Navy last year, the visit to Iran, which nobody seemed to know about and caused a diplomatic embarrassment. Is there any reason to be worried? I mean, the military is not out of control here.
Look, no, I don't think so. I think when the visit to Iran, I don't think the general went off and did it by himself. Durka must have, because normally what happens is they travel on a diplomatic passport, which you get from Durka. So they can't not have known about it. I think what's going to happen is it will have a demoralizing impact on an already demoralized defense force, because they'll be given the blame. And that's bad, because the morale is already not good for obvious reasons. So you'll have more people leave who we'd rather keep, and you'll have fewer people join who we'd like to join. That's where the challenge lies, or the problem lies now.
Is there anything that needs to happen? Is there anything that we need to fix, once again, in the absence of knowing exactly what Cyril Ramaphosa told whoever he told? Is there anything that we need to do to get presumably as whether you are an ally or a partner or even a vassal, in military terms, we need to be a little bit more predictable than we have been, as you were talking about the Italian case and the German case and the US ship 2024.
We do. Look, ideally, we should get our foreign policy aligned with our economic and national interests. At the moment, they diverge almost 180 degrees. Within the sort of defense-related environment, we need to spell out a bit more clearly who does what and how we do it. And if we get a situation like with Italy, with the Turks, with the Germans, all the brigadiers saying the American ship can't come in, that's not a one-star general's call. If something like that happens, we need to step on that officer and say, sorry, old chap, right, off you go sell newspapers somewhere. You no longer work here. But then consider, we had an officer who took armed soldiers to intimidate the police, and we never prosecuted him. So,
Helmut Roemer Heitman, thank you so much for sharing your deep knowledge and expertise with us today. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. And I'm sorry to say the year, young as it is, doesn't look like quietening down anytime soon. I'll be back next week with another edition of Podcast on the Edge, and I hope you'll join me again then. Until then, bye-bye. Keep safe.